Summer still is in full swing, but it has been extremely hot with heat advisories, so we have been trying to find things to do around the house and try to get some maybe inside projects done or fun things we can do inside. And one of those I realized as a homemaking and cooking from scratch is my children don't actually know some of the mainstream food. One of my younger children heard on a show talking about chocolate pudding, and they said, "What is chocolate pudding?" And I realize sometimes it's hard to describe things for the children to understand when they haven't had any kind of reference. So I did my best to explain, and then I said, you know what? That is something we could do here since it doesn't heat up the house that much and it's a fun activity. And it would be fun to make it and try it. And since we live within the city limits, we don't have access to a cow and we don't drink a ton of milk. So milk is usually made for bread making or some fun treats. So I decided to whip up some chocolate pudding. And since I don't normally make this, I had to look up a recipe. And one thing I do when I make a new recipe is I always follow the recipe exactly as written the first time. I tweak it later. And I knew this seemed like a lot of sugar, but I still followed the recipe. And the other thing with making home cooked meals is my children's palates are different and can really taste when something's very sugary and it's almost too sweet for them, which as a mom, I'm not really complaining. I can link the recipe that I used, but next time I would definitely cut down the sugar. And then I just used some of these glasses I had, and I don't know if I should have let that cool a little bit longer before putting it into the molds, but since they were glass, I felt safe to do so. And you'll see here in a minute that I put them on a towel and let them cool for a little bit before placing them into the refrigerator. But also it's nice to have individual size servings, that way everyone can just take one. The recipe didn't call for cinnamon or vanilla, but that was a last minute addition. And then I just poured them into individually sized portions so it would be easy to eat. And I saw also in the recipe that I was talking about and in comments that I had watched a couple videos on making chocolate pudding, and apparently there is controversy when making pudding whether you cover it with cling wrap or just let it cool down and naturally create a little bit of film on top of the pudding. Film, is that what you would say? I don't know. And then of course, I always have a buddy that wants to be in the kitchen, so I'm having him help with the dishes while I finish up my other tasks. So fun fact, I don't like onions. But I've realized some of my children like onions, so I'm trying to know how to have them around and then create them into recipes that not everyone has to eat the onions. I swore growing up, my mom was like, you couldn't even taste the onions. Well, when you don't like something, you can pick up on it almost immediately. It just like makes me shiver thinking about biting into an onion in spaghetti or something. But anyway, I quit Instagram about 6.5, maybe even 7 years ago. I don't know. It's been a long time. But when stories first started, I would use that as kind of my TV time at night. And a lot of those people that I followed were recipe channels or creators that cooked, and I would follow them. One of them I follow, and I still get on her blog occasionally, is No Crumbs Left. And I decided to try her marinated onions for some of my children that like onions but don't necessarily like the bite of it. And I figured, oh, if they don't eat them they can eat them on sandwiches or we can put them on pizza. They did like the marinated onions. You leave them on the counter for a couple days to get that flavor, and they soften a little bit and take out the biteness of an onion. And then when they didn't eat them all in a couple days, I moved it to the fridge and I actually used it over marinated for chicken and roasted vegetables, which was delicious also. Hi, bud. Hello. I didn't use a whole onion just because I didn't know if the children would like this. So I half the recipe, but it's simple. It's onion, some olive oil, red wine vinegar, a pinch of salt, and I didn't have oregano, but I do grow marjoram in my garden that I had freeze dried, so I use that instead. And then I just put a light fitting lid on it, or you can leave it uncovered. I believe that she just leaves it uncovered in a bowl on the counter, but I lightly covered it with one of my lids and leave it there for a day or two before you start eating it. The garden is still in full swing, but the pests are so bad this year that I've had to pull out some things. But my tomatoes are growing, my herbs are doing well. We just harvested my first ever in 10 years of on and off gardening, our potato harvest, which was so fun. The marigolds are loving the heat, but finally we got rain after over 2 weeks, and we got 3.5 inches in one night. So I'm hoping to still be able to harvest a lot, but I've pulled cucumbers and zucchini, and I've restarted some cucumbers and zucchinis. My acorn squash seems to still be doing okay, but I'm coming out every day and I'm picking off bugs and watering. And I went ahead and bit the bullet for a green stalk, and I did this, and I'm focusing this year just on a spring and fall garden in these green stalks. With my perennial herbs, I'll move to this before winter. And I just bought one because I wanted to try it out, but I wanted to focus on having a fall garden in there. I have some green beans planted, some herbs. I am trying sweet potatoes, even though I know you won't get very much, but I thought it would be fun. If I did potatoes, I thought maybe I could do some sweet potatoes. Another new recipe to me is out of my Pomona Pectin recipe book, and that is apple sage jelly. I have harvested and preserved plenty of sage for making my sausage blend and things like that, and it's not a herb that we use in a lot of different ways. But when I was flipping through my cookbook here, I saw an apple sage jelly, and apparently it's really good on pork and on glazes and maybe some vegetables, and I thought I would try it today. So I'm actually having the recipe, and I'm not canning it, I'm just actually putting it in the freezer to try it out before I make a big batch to can. And I got my apple juice just from the grocery store, and I always follow the canning recipe exactly. I really do enjoy using Pomona's Pectin because I can get away with less sugar. The tricky thing I find with Pomona's Pectin is sometimes you can make a batch, and when it sets up and you open a jar later on, months later, that the jam has set and it's kind of hard, like too hard to rub onto a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And if that happens, I just end up using those jams for if it's on a warmed biscuit that the jelly might melt a little bit, or when I make oatmeal jam bars, or over a pancake or something. It's kind of just like you make a jam recipe and maybe it turns into more juicy than actually not setting up. But sometimes with Pomona's Pectin, I find it's the opposite. It's almost too thick. And then also with trying new recipes, and especially with canning, it's so much labor intensive to can anything that every year I only can 1 or 2 new things. To me, I'm not an advanced canner, and I have yet to actually pressure can anything. I've been scared to pressure can. I bought my pressure canner last year and I was like, I'm gonna use it. And then I was like, oh, I'll use it this winter when I have more time. And I never got it out. It's kind of scared me. And a friend said, if you can use an Instant Pot, you can use a canner. My goal this winter is to do that. But it's good to try new recipes, but it can be slow going sometimes when you're learning also a new skill. And then we are moving on to one of actually my favorite meals to make. It's a one-pot meal, but it's so flexible and versatile. I have a lot of these meals, I suppose, in the kitchen, as far as it's like a base recipe, and then you just add whatever you have. You can flip-flop it. So I had some leftovers in the fridge, and I do a 1-pot orzo dinner, and this was a roast left over, and I'm actually sneaking in some eggplant, and I'm crushing it up because I know not everyone loves the texture of eggplant. And this was freeze dried actually from last year. And then the sauce base, I usually have like a half a cup to a cup of sauce, and today I'm using red pepper sauce that I had made and froze months ago from peppers that were on sale at the grocery store. I roasted them and made them into a sauce. And then for our family, I do about 3 cups of orzo. And then when I get that all mixed up, I will add broth. And this juice was left over from roast, but there's so much concentrated flavor, I can just add water on top of that, and it's still not going to dilute any flavor from the recipe. And then I usually pair this with a vegetable, and today it's zucchini from the garden, and then usually some fresh bed on the side, and it's always a big hit. And then I don't add any dairy as far as like cream or milk, but sometimes I add Parmesan cheese on top, which is what I did today. Thanks for being here today. Next week I have a homeschool planner review and flip through if that interests you, and then I will have some preservation videos coming out next month.